ref. Actually got the ball. Good afternoon, Tottenham fans. Welcome back to the Irish Hotspurs with your boys Dave, Jack, Dermot, Soren, and Drew. Hopefully you're all keeping well. Big game today as we travel to Anfield to take on Liverpool. A draw for Liverpool will see them win the league. And you know what? From a Spurs point of view, Bodo Glimt on Thursday, which you have to take into account heading into today's game. It's really difficult to know what team we're going to play, but also what sort of performance we're going to expect. And I do think it leads to some people maybe thinking another embarrassment could be on the cards tonight. I mean, we played Liverpool, 3 times already this season. I think we've already conceded like more than 10 goals against them or something like that, which shows the mammoth of the task tonight. Oh, it's going to be a difficult one, but look, just get today over and done with so we can get to Thursday where we can happy clap. Potentially our last chance to happy clap, so I'm going to take every opportunity. Welcome in, Brandon G. Good to see you. Derek Hutchinson, Malcolm Football, Eamon Hines as well, or Hanke, good to see you. Shotsky's great to see you, along with Steve. Good to see you, my man. Hopefully you're keeping well. Who won the game in the end last night? I tuned into the watch along for like 5 minutes and then end up drifting off. Who ended up winning? Big up Shem Tam as well. Good to see you, my man. We've got Wembley 1 in the house this afternoon. I'm old enough to remember us getting pounded 7-0 up there in 1978. Ozzy and Ricky's first season. I fear a similar outcome today. Well, look, there's no doubt, I mean, honestly, is there anything worse than seeing hundreds of thousands of Scousers sitting there crying and emotional? Honestly, it's a day that I really didn't want to happen today. All my friends have been texting me, ringing me, and everything else. I've had to turn my phone off. Look, it's going to be a tough afternoon up there. They're gonna be up for it, And with us in Europe, we've already seen how some of the other league performances have gone. Forest, Wolves, the game has almost been over before it's even started. If that happens today, it is going to be a long, long fucking evening, that's for sure. Wembley won, but good to see you, my man.
I'm young enough to remember them pumping us 5-1 in our own stadium this season, so...
I've been around long enough to remember we got pumped up there in the Carabao Cup semi-final and ruined my dreams earlier on in the season. Oh, it's going to be a long evening, Wembley. Good to see you, though, my man. THFC2 with die member for 38 months. Big up, guys. Just to thank you for everything you do for Spurs fans on the hard work you put in, which makes this #1 Irish and USA Spurs channel. I really appreciate that, Dermo. Very, very kind of you, my man. Who else have we also got in here? Del Boy, great to see you as always. New York Bulls one. Nice, Red Bulls. Darv as well. Good to see you. Hopefully you're keeping well. But look, let's get straight into it. I mean, just quickly, guys, I'm going to kick off with the boxing last night. Seems to have caused a bit of a controversy across social media last night because British cruiserweight Siobhan Clark walked out to North London Forever, an Arsenal anthem at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But he did end up losing to Spurs fan Vidal Riley, which was all good in the end, who then ended up playing Glory, Glory Tottenham Hotspur at the end. But just quickly put it out there. Should Tottenham put a clause in future stadium rental contracts banning anything associated with Arsenal or our rivals from being played at the events? Because, when I looked at this across social media last night, a lot of fans feel it's humiliating enough what's gone on this season without stuff like this making it worse. I mean, do people agree? Like, for me, the way I see it is I agree. I don't think, like, if they're renting out the stadium, it should be in the clause. This is Tottenham Hotspur. I know that when you're renting it, you don't really care about that. But at the end of the day, this is the fans' sacred turf. You shouldn't be playing anything like that there whatsoever. That's the way I feel on it. I do feel it's embarrassing. I feel like, it's just another PR blunder by the football club to a large degree. I don't know. Look, I don't want to spend too long on this, but if anyone has any feelings on it, feel free.
Definitely further evidence for people that have accused the stadium and especially Daniel Levy of having a soulless sort of nature towards it. I mean, this would definitely sort of add on to that to some degree. It does seem like I don't expect them at all to put a ban or anything on that, but just the fact that it even did go through, it seems like even the boxer himself, kind of knew that he could probably get away with that, kind of knowing that, Spurs would probably just be happy to take whatever price, to play that. So if anybody has accused, the stadium or even, Daniel Levy of having, let's say, a soulless attachment, to this club, this certainly is further evidence for that.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Look, for me, I get that we're making money off it, but you're already unpopular with the fan base, without allowing stuff like that to happen. Anyone else want to come in on it before we move on?
I look. So go on, Son.
No, you can go.
No, go on, Son. You go for you. You jumped ahead of me.
So one of you.
I just totally disagree. I don't see look, I mean, what you're going to do if somebody comes with an Arsenal shirt, are we not going to let them in then? You know, I mean, where does it stop? You've hired the stadium out, and I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't see the problem. Maybe I'm narrow-minded with it. I don't. But
You don't cringe at that if you were in the stadium, as a.
I mean, a lot of those fans probably won't even know. A lot of the people don't even realise what's going on. Look, if you've got an Arsenal fan as a boxer coming in and he wants to play that, and then his opponent's a Spurs fan, what better way to rattle him up? That's the way I would look at it. But look, I mean, I get the argument, and I do see the logic behind what you're saying. To me, I couldn't give a shit. It's not a football match; it's a boxing match, and unfortunately, things like that happen. Like I say, what we're going to do if somebody walks in with an Arsenal shirt on, we're not going to let them in.
Mm-hmm. And look, the thing is, there's a lot of people out there that feel like you as well. When I was looking at on social media, it was 50-50, some outrage saying, oh, it's embarrassing, pathetic, and everything else. And then there's some people saying, look, who really cares at the end of the day? It's a boxing event, whatever, but for me, I just can't help but feel like, if I owned the stadium, and I wouldn't want anything to do with my rivals, being incorporated at that stadium or stuff like that. That's all.
You could take it as far as saying if he walks out to a rap song, then that's done by a rapper that's a Arsenal fan. Or,
Fair.
Where would you stop it? This is the problem that, you could, there is so many things that you could find an argument within. I mean, to me, I just think it's
that's fair.
There.
That's fair. Dermo, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I'm very much in the same line as Soren. I just think we've got bigger fish to fry. I think we've got bigger things to worry about then. And look, the Spurs boxer won at the end of the day, and glory, Tottenham Hotspur was played. So it all ended well. Look, I did cringe a little bit when he came out, and I thought, it's all boxing. It was something to rattle his cage. It was all done. I'm coming onto your turf, and at the end of the day, the Spurs fighter, says, no, this is my home turf. This is my ground. I'm going to beat you, and he did. So they paid to him. But look, it's boxing. Once they loan out the stadium, there's not already. As long as they're getting the cash for it, that's all they care about. So look, I agree with you what you guys are saying, but I'm always sorry on this. So, but I do get there is an argument what you're saying. It is a 50-50 thing, but look, at the end of the day, it's boxing, it's not football. So
no, look, I get it. I just feel like if it was the other way around, would say people at Arsenal allow glory Tottenham Hotspur to be played if they were selling out event, and there was a boxing event. I'm not quite so sure. I don't think they would, and that's where I sort of have my issue with it. But look, like I said, not going to stick on that. Let's move on. Steve says you have to admit it's embarrassing, but the question is, will that boxing money be? Look, we can sit here and say it's being reinvested. We've had events for years. We've had Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, which made way more money. And I mean, we're getting worse and worse and worse, and I think that's the point. We're getting worse. And then you're renting out the stadium, and you're seeing, North London Forever being played through the tannoy and stuff like that. It makes us a bit of a laughing stock, that's all. But anyway, Jack, moving into the game today, Liverpool comprehensively beat Spurs at Anfield in the Carabao Cup. I mean, what do you think went wrong in that game? And was it a matter of Liverpool's quality, Spurs' mistakes, or a combination of both? And what do you think Spurs need to do to improve on that and try and get a better result today?
I think it was the momentum of the Anfield crowd that eventually got to us. It was kind of just us defending for our lives. If I remember correctly, for that first kind of 20 minutes, they were just absolutely all over us, and we just couldn't get out. We were being really suffocated by them. They put a lot of pressure on us. I remember, they were pressing us more than they probably were in some of the other games as well. Arne Slot really went for it, and cleverly so, because we kind of left the door open, as we spoke about, even from the first leg. We should have won that game. Almost like kind of the Eintracht Frankfurt game in the first leg. We could have won that first leg, maybe 2-1, 3-1. Could have given ourselves that cushion, but we didn't. And Spurs then sort of left the game open. I'm sorry, we did win the first leg, of course, but we just could have won by even more goals. But that's what I think happened, is we left the door open. The players probably walked into the stadium knowing that. The Anfield crowd, as they usually do, got behind the team and made it a really difficult atmosphere, probably gave their own home players a lot of adrenaline, a lot of momentum. And I think we always knew it was going to be a difficult 20-ish minutes, kind of like what Frankfurt was going to be. But just this Spurs team just succumbed to the pressure of it. And also Liverpool are a very, very good team that are probably better than us at the end of the day. And so they took advantage of that. And I think Arne Slot also caught us out with the intense pressing that they were doing. I don't even remember us getting out of our own half, you know, in that first 20 minutes, to be honest.
They put Kinski under pressure earlier as well, didn't he, when the ball was at his feet? And I'd probably expect them to do the same with Vicario today. So, you know, Vicario will have to be stayed switched on, you know, and especially, you know, be on point with his decision making. I would argue the same way, you know, the two centre backs, whoever steps into that, it's the same thing. You know, they are going to be pressed. Where my concern comes in is, you know, last time we were at Anfield, we didn't really create a whole lot whatsoever. No. You know, we could barely get out of our own half, barely string 3 passes together. And I just wonder, you know, could today's game pan out to be something similar? I hope not. You know, it'd be nice to see us, you know, create a little bit more. I think if Trent plays, I think there's room to put the ball in behind him, make sure you tell to sort of sit on him, you know, sit on the last shoulder, run in behind, make them movements, you know. But look, let's wait and see what happens today. But we were largely outclassed down there earlier on in the season. You know, it was for the last 20 minutes, it was really boys against men. Like we were chasing them and they were just popping the ball around us, pop ball around us. It was so easy. And where also my concern comes in is, you know, the last few games, we've conceded early goals. You know, not in the Forest, the game was done before it even started. Wolves to a certain degree, you know, Frankfurt we conceded early as well. You know, it's becoming a bit more of a theme lately that we're out of games before they even get going. And I don't want that to happen today, because all you're doing is just giving, you know, Liverpool players the momentum, the belief, and then they'll go, you know, look to romp home and celebrate in style in front of the crowd. You got to remember, when they last won this, they didn't have a crowd there. You know, they're going to want to put on a show for them today. They're going to want to celebrate with them today. So, you know, Liverpool will be up for it. It's just how it will be, you know, how it will be. But I suppose that probably brings us on to the next question then, you know, and we'll go down to you, Drew. We haven't heard from you yet. Ahead of the Europa League quarter-final against Frankfurt, Spurs were completely outplayed by Wolves, and it was clear that the players were holding back to preserve themselves for the Europa League. Now, with the Europa League semi-final against Bodo Glimt just days away, and that competition now essentially defining our season, what kind of performance are we expecting at Anfield today from Tottenham? Do you think the players will be mentally and physically ready to, you know, rise to the challenge, especially with added motivation of maybe trying to spoil Liverpool's day to a large degree? Or are we in for another flat, cautious display with one eye already on Thursday? Because that seems to be the trend coming out the latter part of the season, that we do tend to just focus on the Europa League now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying my best to be really optimistic, and I have been for weeks. I wanted us to go unbeaten. I thought this was a turning point, and every time I've said that, we've just basically shown up and been a bit of a dumpster fire. The one thing I will say about the EPL game, obviously the defence and the keeper was like, it was a completely novice back five, right? I think they played like maybe 2-3 games together.
To a certain degree, you know. Do you not?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they decide to not play those guys, I mean, I'm concerned that it might be something similar. And like you say, if we go down a goal early, I can see them just running rampant. I know you just mentioned Trent Alexander-Arnold, but you know, if he's going to Real Madrid, this is a chance for him to win the Premier League in front of the Anfield faithful before he leaves. Like, everything's against us, which means we'll probably win 2-0. So, like, you know, I mean, honestly, there's a small part of me that thinks that, but I mean, look, this Liverpool team have been there and done it, and regardless of having quite a young midfield in terms of how long they've been there, you know, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, and McAllister. The rest of them have pretty much been there and done it. Do you know what I mean? You got obviously Mo Salah, there's your Virgil van Dijks, your Konates, Robinson. Like, you know, they're everything we want to be. I was on a show yesterday and we were talking about sliding doors moments, and we were talking about how, unfortunately, you know, Liverpool are just, you know, as from a Spurs perspective, Liverpool are a perfectly run club, right? When they needed to make the tough decisions and make a change for the betterment of the team, they did it. They got rid of, you know, Coutinho, and they got in the two people that they needed the most, and they built from there. And unfortunately, you know, there's just so many what ifs, and it always comes back to me when we play Liverpool. And I think even more so because of, you know, losing in the Champions League. Like, it hurts even more playing them now. because it just rubs salt in the wound. They're just so well run. They're doing well. And, we very rarely get one over on them. So I don't know. I think today I'm just going to watch football for the sake of watching football. I'm hoping. I mean, I got a pair of trainers this week, a new pair that came in the mail, and they're actually perfectly
they're nice.
Tottenham, right? They got Tottenham blue, Tottenham white. They've even got a shitty bit of red on them.
Nice.
The only difference between these and my club at the moment is these got more soul. But,
they're a nice pair of runners, by the way. They're a beautiful pair of runners.
Retail therapy.
Yeah. And I love the way you have Spurs in your mind when you're picking them as well. That's absolutely brilliant. Right. But, you mentioned Liverpool there about being a well-run club, and I think what annoys me about it is, like, look, we're never going to do what City has done. We're never going to do what Arsenal has done. We drop £100 million on a player, but Liverpool is the model where you should be looking for where they spend reasonably, what I would argue maybe what we do on transfers and stuff like that, but they tend to get a lot of their transfers right. And if they've got a player in mind, you don't care, the price, even if other people think it's over the odds, they bring him in. Whereas us, I do think a lot of our business is dictated by price, and I do think when you look at their model, they're a perfect example that you still can't compete with the likes of your cities and that who are spending mad money. Yeah. If you do things the right way, but look, let's not forget they've had a lot of stability over the years, with Jurgen Klopp and people like that. They've had a lot of them players kept around. When Real Madrid have come hunting around or other teams have come hunting around their best players, they've been managed to tie them down to contracts. We sell them on. And this is my problem with Tottenham Hotspur. If we want to be a Liverpool, when we've got a gym, you've got to be able to tie them down to contracts and build around it. It just seems like we don't know how to do that to a large degree. And
I don't know. I tell you what, Dave.
Go on.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm just a salty fan, if I'm just because Tottenham Hotspur has scarred me so much. But I've just got this thing in my mind that I don't know if it's specifically Daniel Levy, but I don't know who else to point the finger at. I think he makes it so hard sometimes, with the purchasing of players, with the selling of players, with him thinking that he's just this master negotiator when I don't really think that he is. And I look at teams that buy players, and Liverpool being a prime example, and I look at, just the McAllister deal, right? What was it, 35, 40 million? Like, if that was us, we'd have been squeezed for every last penny, and we'd have broken the player. It would have been $62 million transfer, rising to 70. We would have been pushed out of the equation. And yet Liverpool rock up and it's, well, we'll give you 30 and then 5 later if he does all right. They're like, okay. And these deals happen. I'm like, why can't we do those deals? And I think Levy has blackballed us across England and across Europe. I think whenever we rock up to do a deal, there's a Levy tax. If we're buying a player, they add 10 mil more and make it harder. If we're selling a player, they offer us 10 million less. And there are deals that go on in football. And I think, why the hell can't we do that? Because we got the money to do it. And I hate reverting back to the common denominator, but I don't see where else the problem lies in that regard.
Look, I was actually thinking about this, I've been lying in bed the last few days. I haven't been well. I've had to take the injection for my skin and that. But, Tottenham Hotspur was still on my mind. And, I was thinking about it. And the amount of turnover we've had since Pochettino in terms of players, coaching staff, managers, director of footballs up at boardroom level, youth coaches, etc., etc. It's absolutely insane. There's no continuity in any department at Tottenham Hotspur, bar Daniel Levy. And look, to your point, that's why, you have to maybe the book does have to go with him because, everyone else has come in and tried. And like we've brought some good people in here, players, coaches, managers, etc. But no one seems to be able to make it work. And what you're actually seeing now is the times of the Poch players sticking around for 6-7 years, that's gone. Now we're seeing some of our better players come to the fore. Now they already want out the door. You're already seeing rumors circulating. You're seeing another one about Maddison today. His future at Tottenham sort of, is linked to Postecoglou's, to a certain degree. I'm not sure what way they meant it now, but, you're starting to see players maybe angling themselves out the door. But the amount of turnover we've had at every in every facet of this football club is absolutely insane. And that's why we are where we are. That's why we're in one big mess, because there's been so much turnover everywhere. There's been so much crisscross of plans, ideas, everything.
Yeah.
No one actually knows what the right way is for it anymore.
Rooty Toot says in the chat, the money Levy has wasted since sacking Poch, he probably could have paid for another stadium. And I know this is quite an outlandish thought, but just think if everyone at that point, and I say everyone at the club, if everyone had taken a collective deep breath and just allowed common sense to dictate everything and say one swallow doesn't make a summer. We had a bad season. Let's reset within these parameters. I just think we'd be such a different club. I think we'd be closer to Liverpool, just getting back on topic. We'd be closer to Liverpool than we are now. I'm not, might not be winning, like we'd want to win, but I hand on heart, I truly believe we'd be up there.
Yeah, probably 2 fewer rebuilds.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just really annoying. It's really annoying, but we've had far too much turnover. If you want to be able to, like, you even look at Man City. They spend a lot of money, but they've had a lot of stability there over the years. You look at Arsenal under Arteta, a lot of stability. You look at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, a lot of stability there. We're chopping and changing left, right, and centre. And I'm sorry, but it reminds me a lot of Everton. Where they got themselves in a pickle. They started changing absolutely everything, and stuff like that. And I just think we're maybe heading towards that a little bit, where it's just so much change and no one actually knows what the right direction is. And I think, we are at a critical point where a lot of the decisions we have to make this summer have to be for the long term. You have to say for the next 3-4 years. I know football, can change very, very quickly, but I do think it's getting to the point where the managers, some of the players you're signing and stuff like that, they have to be committed to this for the next 4 to 5 years. We can't keep having this constant turnover because look at the absolute mess we are in. We can blame Postecoglou solely for this, but since Pochettino, we've had Jose Mourinho, Nuno, Stellini, Mason, Conte, now Postecoglou in the dugout. You look at players that come here. Name me any players that have really kicked on at Tottenham Hotspur. A lot of the players that come here, they're all failing. And you look at Man United, it's very, very similar. They pay over the odds for the players that they're buying. They're not getting the production on the pitch, but the reality is any player that walks into Man United, none of them are improving, even though they're players that a lot of other clubs would have chased. None of the managers have been able to get them out of this situation. They've had a lot of turnover in terms of the backroom staff and all that sort of stuff. It's the same at Tottenham Hotspur, and look where the two clubs are now. I just think it's very, very important that Tottenham really do make decisions now for the long term moving forward because, we are that, like, Everton are performing better than us, but the reason why they've got in the mess they were in is because there was so much rotation, chopping and changing managers, 2-3 managers a season. We keep going down that route. We don't have the characters in the dressing room to be able to fight us out of relegation battles, maybe the way Everton and that have done in the past. They were hardened to it. We're not. We don't have that sort of experience. So if we end up getting into one next season, we are absolutely fucked. That's why it's imperative to make the right decisions this summer. On every level, your physio department all the way through to the manager have to make the right decisions. Soren, do you want to come in on that? Jack, Darmo, and you want to come in on that before we move on?
I did a show the other night on transfers, just transfer spend since Pochettino up to now. And I think we did one, I think it was Pochettino, I can't remember. On one of them, the average spend was something 11 million euro on every player. We sort of broke it down and give an average spend of that sort of his tenure at the club, and we cannot keep going on. You look at Liverpool; they sold Coutinho and bought 2 players that have actually a mainstay of their team, VDV and Alisson, I think. You look at that, and then they've just added to it. They bought Mo Salah. They've added little bits and pieces. When the going got tough on the Klopp, they didn't sack Klopp; they backed him. And they gave him time to build what it is. And we're seeing the Liverpool side that could win the league today. That's the side that Klopp built because they were patient with him and they gave him the money. They didn't have to spend big money. They spent it sensibly. They spent it in the right way. Well, we've just gone out. We're like I don't know. We got a load of money. We've gone out and pissed it up against the wall. That's what we've done.
But yeah, Mehmet's point here, he says it always costs more in the long run when you are patching up the problems instead of actually dealing with the problem. And I think he's absolutely spot on there. What's that saying? You buy cheap, you buy twice, or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget though that it's all right saying Levy's wasted the money, and at the end of the day, we know the buck stops with him, and he's his. But he's employed people that are
Also
supposedly good at the job to do the buying of players. So
this is my point.
That's a fair point.
This is my point, though, Soren. Why do people come here and they're all bad? You can make the case that maybe he's bringing in good director of football that's going bad at Tottenham. So I've made the case with managers that he hires good managers since Pochettino, but it goes wrong at Tottenham. Even some of the players we've bought, but none of them are really kicking on or excelling. So what is at Tottenham where shit's going wrong?
Well, let's bring one example up. So Levy bought Jed Spence, who was the shit player, apparently, according to Conte, didn't want him. And now half the fans are saying he's probably the player of the season this year. So he's not doing all bad, but we can't just say he's wasted all the money without trying to find the opposite side, the plus side. But, I just find it interesting that we sit here and it's always got to be somebody's fault. We know that, we're all wired the same. We've got to blame somebody. But if we're going to blame Daniel Levy for everything, we've also got to put on, well, he got us to a Champions League final. He got us to second and third in the league with a squad.
Oh, that's the thing, though, sorry. Like, I don't sit here and blame Levy for everything. The club that I supported as a boy to where it is now, it's a complete different football club. And for most of my lifetime, it's been on an upward trajectory. When I first supported this club, we were mid-table in the league. We weren't really doing much in the league. We were a cup team. And look, he's brought Champions League football, European football to a degree. You could say maybe he's brought the expectations to Tottenham alongside Pochettino. Yeah. The reality is we are going backwards. The last 6 years, we are hiring good people at this football club, but it's going wrong. It's going tits up.
It's like saying, it's absolutely dreadful at the moment, but everyone keeps telling us if we got another manager in, we'd probably be top 4 at least with this squad. So how can Levy be sacked? How can we be sat here saying Levy's bought a shit squad, but with a different manager we could be challenging?
Dave and I made that point. We think that's a contradiction.
You're dealing with me, though, Soren, and I've maintained I don't think we've bought a good squad. I've maintained that. I've been consistent on that.
I think some of the players that we've got are. I mean, look, let's just go back to, was it last season before we bought Vicario instead of what's his name? Raya. We all wanted David Raya, but we scrimped out on Vicario. Well, the first season, Vicario was player of the season for most people. So Van der Ven, we wanted Tapsoba or we wanted somebody else, so we got Van der Ven. Oh, now all of a sudden Van der Ven's a hero to a lot of us. There's arguments left, right, and centre, but when it works, nobody wants to argue and say that it was a good buy. But when it don't work, everybody's quick enough to jump on Levy's back. So look, I'm not saying Levy has done a good job, but I just find it incredible that we can only lay blame at Levy's feet and not say that he's done some good, because the state of the football club at the moment, in my opinion, this season alone, is not down to Daniel Levy. He does not pick that team. He does not pick that tactics. He does not put that team on the pitch and tell them how to play. So
he did pick Johan Lang.
Pardon?
He did pick Johan Lang, and that's where I argue it's gone wrong
with
the Postecoglou
this year. Is the thing, this is where the argument comes that, yes, we can blame Levy for putting the wrong people in the wrong jobs time after time after time. And I get that argument. There is no argument against that. But if you're employing somebody that has, to some degree, got a good reputation, then you put, I'm saying to some degree, then you've got to look at it and think, well, he's not literally, a lot of people argue with me on the Ange Postecoglou part of this, but, he's not literally just gone and picked people that have never done the job before or that have failed drastically wherever they've done the job before. He's put people in charge, in theory, that have had success.
Does he match the recruitment up with it, though?
But I mean, it might be different levels. You know, we can argue Hans Postecoglou, he's been very successful where he's been, but not at this level. So the step up maybe hasn't quite been. Lange, Scott Munn, you know, Scott Munn came from the City group, didn't he? If I remember right. Well, you know, I mean, he was doing pretty good stuff for City out in Asia. So why all of a sudden now he's come to Tottenham and Johan Lange at Villas? You know, when we got him, some people were saying he'd done a really good job. Now they're saying it was a really shit job. You know, the arguing has got to be to the point where you look at the players that we have bought that have absolutely failed, and Ndombele was a Poch signing. He wanted that player, but then we got rid of Poch, and all of a sudden the guy's under a different manager. So is that Levy's fault? No, but everybody.
Well, I tell you, but hang on. One thing I would say about that, Soren, is just that, you know, at that time you've got Levy, who obviously has hired Poch and he's hired Steve Hitchen. Poch has decided that he wants on Dembele. So however it works, he goes to Steve Hitchen, says, this is the player I want. So in part, it was maybe Poch's fault. And this is all hypothetical, right? Because we'll never know. But if it played out the way that it could have played out, Pochettino goes to Hitchen. He says he wants on Dembele. Hitchen goes to Levy. Levy finally at that time decides, you know what, let me open some purse strings and let me actually give the player what he wants. So to a certain extent, he was backed in this instance. The issue that I've then got is that you then draft in a player that maybe needs some time to hit the ground running. The issue is that then Levy gets so scared, he doesn't give Poch the time to nurture the player. Yeah. So he then fires Poch. We then get a player that's like, hang on, I came because I wanted to play with that guy. And now Levy hasn't given that chance for that situation to develop, and he's too quick to go, oh, do you know what? No, we got to do this, or we got to start again, and we got to start again. And then he twists and turns the boat. So this is where I guess maybe it's not that everything is his. How do I put this? Because I'm with you, right? I agree. You can't blame him for absolutely everything. But if you look into situations like that, I just feel like he's missed a step, or he's missed a trick, or he's just not let things pan out. And, you know,
I think his decision making on the football side is very poor. I think that's, you know, and at the end of the day, we're football fans. That's what we care about. Honestly, I couldn't care about concerts or whatever else he wants to do with that stadium. At the end of the day, I fully understand it's good revenue for Tottenham Hotspur. But on the footballing side of things, you know, since Pochettino, he's like, this is what drives me mad, right? You go back and watch the documentary. He spoke about how much he's admired Jose Mourinho, to the point he was sitting there looking at him in the way my girlfriend doesn't even look at me on a Thursday night when we're watching telly. It was embarrassing the way Levy was falling over the guy. But then Jose Mourinho goes, I want Kim Min-jae. Brings in Joe Rodon. He spends more on Joe Rodon than what we would have spent on Kim Min-jae. And the thing is, if you're bringing in Jose Mourinho, who knows how to win, why aren't you listening to him? You know, I get your point again, Soren, on the Jets bench team now. But the point is, it's already cost the manager its job. You know, at the end of the day, if you're bringing in Conte, who's won a Premier League at Chelsea and stuff like that, won cups at Chelsea, won Serie A titles and stuff, if he says, I need a certain player for this position, you go out and you get it. You listen to the guy. You know, you don't go, well, I know better than you, and I'm going to bring in this guy. You know, bringing in Joe Rodon, to a degree, cost Jose Mourinho his job with some of the signings he made underneath him. Same with Conte and some of the decisions he's making there. You know, and I just think it's become a huge problem on the football side.
It goes back even further than that, dude.
But like Drew says, he's very, very quick to pull the trigger. He never has the nerve to sit there and go, do you know what? I see this, Drew. Let's sit down and figure a way out through it. He never has the nerve to do that. We are firing managers at the rate bottom teams fire their managers. And where are we right now? Stay, you know, just surviving relegation.
Dave,
keep going down that route. We're going to become them. And just quickly, Stevie's point as well, I think is spot on here as well, where he says every time we fire a coach or director or we switch our philosophy. Every time we go down that road, we get further away from our identity, our DNA. How has it worked for us? And that's the thing, you know, we all sit here and say we want a certain style, you know, we want to be known for something. But the clubs that we're looking at are the clubs we're trying to chase. They've had the managers in there for 3, 4, 5 seasons, you know, maybe before Arne Slot, but they've had Jurgen Klopp, you know, they've had continuation on in terms of they've had a core of a team together for quite some time as well. And we're so far away from that, and we're never going to get there if we keep chopping and changing. Because you're right. If you sack a manager, you're bringing in another manager. He wants different players. Like we had 3 defensive managers on the trot. And the whole idea with a director of football is he will sort of build a framework of the squad in a way that, they want them to play. And it's up to you to pair your manager with it to a certain degree. But even that theory is flawed. We had 3 defensive managers on the trot, Nuno, Jose, Conte. They all had different defensive systems, different requirements for players and stuff like that. The reality is, if you're bringing in a manager, you need to listen to the guy. What do we expect? And I do think I agree with Drew. He deserves praise for where he's brought this club to: Champions League football, the stadium, the training complex, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I care about on the field, and we are getting worse. And his decision making is the main problem to it.
I think. Look, in my view, in that,
just quickly, the argument to that is Conte. The mistake was hiring him in the first place, because what person is going to throw money at a manager that's a winning manager? I get, but to me, it was the whole hiring of Conte was wrong, because he was never going to stay. So why are you going to throw hundreds of millions of pounds at him for players when he's refusing to sign a new contract? He's not going to stay. He's only here for the money in the first place.
Why bring him in then?
Well, that's what I say. That was the mistake in the first place. That's where the mistake was, bringing him in. But let's not forget as well with Levy, he's not the only person that makes those decisions. There is a board of directors that vote on a lot of these decisions, and a lot of the time he gets outvoted. So as much as he's the face and he's the only one that we actually argue against, it's not just him. There's Donna Cullen, there's the American bloke, there's the other chap. We all blame Levy because that's the only name we really know. But you look at when we were going to bring Poch back. Levy was up for bringing Poch back. Don and Cullen and the American bloke didn't want him back, so therefore he didn't come back. But we all blame Levy.
Why is he listening to him? Tell him to fuck off.
Pardon?
Tell him to fuck off. I mean, I'm not being funny. But why is someone like Donna Cullen or that other idiot making decisions at Tottenham Hotspur?
Because that's part of it. It's a voting system. It's not all on one head.
Well, I just think,
a board of directors, then you have to put it to a vote. And if you get outvoted 3-1 or whatever it is, you cannot just say to them, "Oh, well, I mean, I don't know because I'm not in that business." But
no, but I get what you're saying. But if he has a stronger manner about him or really believes in something, he can't say, "Look, just trust me on this and see it through." You know what I mean? There are other ways around it, but
Yeah, but if he's still outvoted 3-1 or whatever the voting system is, then he hasn't got his way. And we're all sitting
I've seen this on Suits. He'd basically have to go around to all the partners beforehand and convince them of the vision, and then get them to all be on board, and then they have the vote. I saw this last night.
Succession.
Just quickly, International Observer, we're not even talking about Andrew's future right now. You've just hopped in a conversation and assumed that's what we're talking about. It's not. You're absolutely wrong on that. And by the way, I've never ignored the fact that we've lost that amount of games. You've heard me say continuously, it can't keep going on like this and stuff like that. So, but you have hopped in on a conversation that you put in something that you don't even know what we're arguing about. Just quickly, kill switch. Engage says pool win means no title for Scum. Not too bad. Look. Yeah, I get it, but I'd rather win today because Liverpool will still win the title next week, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? It's just inevitable they're going to win it at this point.
Great
and then
name,
Ryan
Love that name. Big up.
YouTube member. Big up, Ryan. Oh, good to see you, my man. Hopefully you're keeping well. Yeah, sorry, Dermot. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah, if it's all right. I just want to say, look, I get everyone's conversation about Levy, but if you look at the director of footballs we've had who have wasted money, Steve Hitchen, and people like that. The only two decent, I think, director of footballs we've had has been Paul Mitchell and Paratici. And the quality of players Paratici brought in during his tenure is the quality of the teams we've got now. The likes of Vicario, Mickey van der Ven, Romero, Kulu, Bentancur. And you look at the players Steve Hitchen brought in, not great. And he doesn't get a sniff of any sort of criticism.
Hang on, that's a lie. Me and Jack pointed that out 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know you. I'm not saying you
general
two.
basis,
I'm not actually saying you two, but I'm saying that everyone else is not having a go. I've never said you two didn't, but it's everybody else. So I wasn't pointing the finger at you two. I was just making a point.
saying, people have criticised them. I do think the blame has gone towards them,
Well, I've never seen it apart from you two, but I've never seen it other around anyway. I was just making the point that, you can blame Levy for a lot of things, but he did get Paratici right, and he did get Paul Mitchell right. And look at the players they did bring in. They were decent director of footballs. They can only spend the money that the chairman gives them, but also a lot of people don't forget it was Joe Lewis that has to pump the money in. He has never pumped any money into Tottenham, so you've got to somehow work within a budget. He's a billionaire, so where's the blame for him? Where's the blame for him not pumping money into the club? We've had to. He could afford to build the stadium without us borrowing any money. He could have done that out of his own pocket. Okay, there might have been some little bit of loan somewhere along the line, but where's the blame for him? Levy's the face. Levy will get the blame because he's the face of the organization. He's the face of the Enid Group. But really, the blame should be also laid at Joe Lewis for actually not giving a shit. He bought the football club. He should be the one pumping money into it.
It's true,
and he doesn't. So what's Levy supposed to do? He has to make money somewhere. And yes, not everything's right. He's made complete cock-ups along the line. He should have stayed with Poch instead of sacking him. I agree. Also agree with you. He should tell the board to F off. I'm the chairman here. I'm in charge. I'm doing it my way. And the likes of Donna Cullen and all these other people have made poor decisions. But at the end of the day, if you're an owner of a football club or owner of an organization, it's your responsibility to put money into that club or that organization to help the chairman out, to help the manager out. And if you don't, that chairman there's got to go around and say, right, how am I going to raise money for transfers? How am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with this? And I think Levy's too much of a pushover. He's easily swayed. He's not perfect. I'm not saying he is. He's made plenty of mistakes. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, the likes of Joe Lewis should be handing up for not pumping money into the football club. And also the director of footballs we've had, they haven't been good at their jobs, apart from Paul Mitchell and Paratici. They're the only two, I think, directors of football I can remember that were decent at their job. And you look at the quality of players Paratici brings in, that stands for itself.
Two things there, Derek. The guy who came to us and then went to Chelsea wasn't bad.
No, that's true.
Arneson, Fred Arneson. Frank Arneson.
I mean, to jump on to Dermot's point there, which he kind of said, and then in theory, Levy is an employee of Joe Lewis. Yes, he's obviously a part owner now, but he was brought in and he will have a statement of where he's got to get to. Now, he's obviously doing the job that Joe Lewis wants him to do because he's still in the position he's in. So, if Joe Lewis is as the owner of Tottenham Hotspur or Enoch, whichever way you want to look at it, that if he said to think, look, as long as we're sustainable and as long as we're doing this and as long as we're making money, that's the position I want you to be in. Now, that's in theory Joe Lewis's fault, not Daniel Levy's, because if, like Dermot says, if he's given him a budget and it's you will only spend what you earn, then the argument's there that it's not all Levy's fault, but he's the only one that ever gets it in the neck.
The thing is, I think we're at a point though where we earn enough to be able to spend decent money, and still spend, live within our means and stuff like that. I think we're at that point. But the problem is what we're spending it on. How many times we're buying in positions. How many times have we bought in right back since Kyle Walker? How many times have we bought in left back? How many centre backs have we bought into this football club? Centre midfielders, forward players, to replace players and stuff. We always get it wrong. How many managers have we hired and fired? How many different philosophies have we gone down? These are all under Daniel Levy's control. And at the end of the day, the protests aren't just Daniel Levy. They're Enoch and Levy. People are calling out Joe Lewis and stuff like that. But the reality is there's a lot of stuff that is in Daniel Levy's control. And I understand what you're saying. But I think the question has to be asked. Since the stadium built, since that Champions League final, is he doing the best in this current situation? And I would answer, I don't think he has. I think up until the heights of the Champions League final, he was taking that club in one trajectory. Even myself, I was a bit like, do you know what? I don't understand it. We're going in one. But ever since then, he has made bad decision after bad decision. And I'm sorry, that falls on him. He has to take accountability. He makes players take accountability. Well, actually, no, he doesn't. Sorry, he makes managers take accountability. He never takes accountability himself, and at the end of the day, I'd argue, I just don't think he's made the best of the situation since that Champions League final. The fact that we're even getting into a position where we have to sell our best player again tells me everything I need to know. The whole stadium and everything else was so that we could compete, offer these guys the wages that Real Madrid's and all the top clubs around Europe are offering. We're still at a point where he doesn't want to break the 200K a week barrier. You know what I mean? And it's just like we're not seeing progression on since then. I'm sorry, but that's where he does have to take the blame. I'm sorry. When I was growing up, I didn't really care about the ownership, but we're getting to the point now where anyone that comes into this football club, despite the CV they have, it goes wrong. And that shows that the way your club is run is the problem. It's been like that at Man United since they got rid of Sir Alex Ferguson. Since they've got rid of him, the club has been continuously going backwards. And anyone that they buy or anyone that they bring into the club, they don't excel. And that's because the club is run so piss poor. That's because there's been so many different chopping and changing of directions. And you're looking at the two clubs with no DNA on the football pitch. Well, why would there be when you've had so many different people with different ideas, different director of footballs, with different players that they prefer, different managers, different coaches, everything else? At least the one big problem, unless we sort it, it's going to keep going this way. So, like I keep saying, there has to be massive decisions and the right decisions made this summer, because if not, we are fucked.
Stateside footy, Steve's made that point actually. He says when Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, etc. decide to make changes, they do it within the confines of their club's identity. They don't switch identities away from what's made them successful. Which I think is a valid point. And if I think about it too hard, like the upper echelons of Tottenham Hotspur, like Daniel Levy and the board and stuff, like think about The Office. Think about David Brent and Phyllis at the copier and stuff like that. Like it feels like that sometimes up there. Do you know what I mean? They're all just bumbling around getting paper off the copier and just not like, it just doesn't really feel like, there's much up top. But anyway, I think we probably got way off topic. Let's talk about the Liverpool game, because none of us we can't wait for this thing, right?
Well, do you know what? I mean, I'm glad we sort of got delved into a topic like that, because to be honest with you, talking points were hard to come by heading into this game. Heading into the Bodo Glint game, there's as many as you want, but heading into this game, it's a bit of a nothing burger. It's really hard, to sort of come up with the talking points. But look, I think one thing we are all expecting heading into today's game is that we are going to prioritize Thursday's game in terms of team selection. So we will see, a sort of ragtag crew put out there. But one conversation I did want to have, and I'll go down to the bottom of my document, we'll actually work our way backwards, was actually around Dominic Solanke and Richarlison, because I find it a very interesting conversation, because Ange was asked in his pre-match press conference about, the difference maybe between Richarlison and Solanke. And here's what he had to say. He said, they are different types of players. Richie is a true 18-yard box striker who makes an impact when the ball arrives in the box, whether that's in the air or on the ground. He tends to operate around those areas. And I think that's very clear when you see that he can find goals in this system and the way he plays. He's a live wire within that box. But then Postecoglou says about Dom Solanke, he says, while Dom works in other... He says what he tends to so he says about Richarlison, he tends to operate in those areas while Dominic Solanke works in other areas. And I just struggled when I'm sort of maybe thinking about it. What do we think those other areas are where Solanke maybe excels? Because for me, I'm sorry, but the name of a game of a striker is to score goals. It's what you're judged on. It doesn't matter what you do elsewhere on the pitch. You're ultimately always going to be judged on goals. And I struggle to see where maybe Postecoglou is going with this one. So maybe I presume the question is, what is the big difference between Dominic Solanke and Richarlison?
He was quite good in the canteen.
The goal celebration?
True. Canteen. He's a mean cookie, Solanke.
He kind of in the press conference, he kind of suggested that they're actually very similar. I did watch the press conference, and he did kind of at first answer that he finds them to be very similar. I guess when he was being pressed on it and was looking for a distinction between the two. He seemed to suggest that Richarlison is more of a inside the penalty area, inside the box type of striker, more of a poacher type of striker, whereas Solanke is someone that can drop deep and try to link up play and also then, sort of provide other things that maybe Richarlison doesn't in terms of that department. Not saying that we actually see Solanke do that on a regular basis. I think you and I have, kind of pointed out watch alongs. He can be a bit clumsy looking, especially when we've been blessed with, the true elite player of, linking up play, which was Harry Kane. So we're never really going to be able to maybe compare them, favorably because we know what real link up play looks like. But I guess, when he was being pressed about it, he seemed to suggest that they are they are very similar to a degree. And then he just sort of said that Richarlison is someone that he thinks does very well in the system when it comes to scoring inside the penalty area or inside the box. He said an 18-yard box striker, I believe, were his exact words.
Well, I just wonder then as well, everybody, based on the team's current style of play, whose approach maybe suits this team's better, Richarlison then or Solanke? Who do we think suits this system best then?
For me, I think it probably suits Solanke a little bit more than Richie. I know Richie's got the stats. You read at them stats last week, Dave, which is very telling. I think Solanke just offers you that bit more. I really do. And he tries to bring other people into the game. He tries to bring the wingers in. He tries to bring people into the game more than Richie does. Though Richie, to be fair to him, has been injured a lot. So we've probably never seen really the best of Richie, to be fair. He's never had a true crack at the whip, where Solanke has had a crack at the whip, if you know what I mean. But I think Solanke, just suits the Nan system better a little bit more than Richie. Maybe I'm wrong. On what do I know? I'm just a football fan that talks crap apparently. But for me, I think Richie and I think Solanke. I feel sorry for Richie because he's come here, and I've always said that it was a small fish in a big pond. But if he didn't have the injuries, I think he would have been a bit more of a success. But with all the injuries and all the other things he's had to go through, I think it's affected him big time at the club. And I think Solanke just, I think Solanke just plays it more, but that's just my opinion.
He did compare Solanke to Ekitike because he said, what he asked of his striker is very different. What he said, like what Top Mueller asked of his striker. He said Ekitike, he literally said, gets to sort of walk around, preserve his energy. And then when the ball is played to him, he has a lot of reserved energy to then go attack. Whereas he said in Solanke's case, he has to work his tail off and defend from the front and then, work just as hard out of possession as he does in possession. So in a way, Postecoglou's best striker is someone who can stay fit, in a variety of ways so they don't get injured all the time, like Richarlison. But then he has to be able to also press his nuts off, for basically 90 minutes and basically do both sides of the game. He really is asking for a true complete striker, someone that can work his tail off and then also be able to link up play and then be in the box to finish off a move as well, which is definitely asking a lot of your forward and asking a lot of your striker. I mean, very few that you can even think of that actually are able to do that. Maybe, I don't know, like a Carlos Tevez or maybe like a Diego Costa kind of comes to mind or something like that. Someone who just sort of ran around like a nutcase, but then also was able to link up play and then finish off the moves at the same time. Solanke doesn't do a few of those things. Like, I don't think his link up play is inconsistent. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's poor. You'll see it both in games. He obviously works just as hard as anyone else. He does stay more fit than Richarlison in terms of injuries. This season, he is still, at the end of the day, been more fit than Richarlison has ever been when you look at it. That's not saying very much. And then when it comes to finishing off moves, though, Solanke hasn't been able to do that for a variety of reasons. The service plenty of times has just not been there. But then when the service has technically been there, he's not really been able to take the opportunities and the chances that a good striker would, or at least a striker that's in confidence and in form. So you combine Richarlison and Solanke, you probably get exactly what Ange needs. But the issue is that we can't, and his best striker is probably someone that's able to stay on the pitch and someone that can run like a marathon, because he really does. I thought that was interesting that he said that about Ekitike, because you and I thought, God, what a beautiful player to watch, but he was right. Like, Ekitike does sort of walk around for 30 minutes until he touches the ball, and then he works his magic. But that's not what Ange asks of his striker. He basically asks his striker to work harder than almost anybody else in the team.
Yeah, no, look, I fully understand that. Do you know what? I take on board the points you've made there. I think for me, when I look at it, I think Richarlison suits the system better. I think the numbers probably, suggest that. But also, I just think he's more mobile than Dom Solanke.
Yeah.
I think, he can actually get himself in the box quicker, which means we can get crosses into the box. Rather, whereas with Dom Solanke, sometimes he often does arrive late and stuff like that. And I just think Richarlison's a lot more mobile than Dom Solanke, and I think that actually suits the system better, in my opinion. Not only that, I think Richarlison knows how to sniff out a chance better. This whole thing that Postecoglou going, Richarlison's an 18-yard box player. I mean, that's what you need your striker to do at the end of the day. The name of the game is to score goals. That's what you're supposed to do. Even when Dom Solanke came off the bench the other day, the amount of crosses coming in, he can get on the end of one. Richarlison was the one still get on the end of them, still causing a threat. And I just wonder, is Richarlison a better overall player than Dom Solanke in general? And is that why he suits the system better? Now, of course, what you say is true, Jack. Availability is what suits the system best to a large degree. But and look, actually, I think they're both bang average. I don't think there's a lot of great striker depth out there right now. I think, over the last maybe 10 years, football in general hasn't produced strikers at the rate maybe they were. But I do think Richarlison is just a lot more mobile. And I just, when I think about this system with Richarlison in it, and when I think about this system with Solanke in it, it's a lot more bearable to watch when Richarlison's in the system. In my opinion, it's a bit more exciting to watch when he's in the system than when Dom Solanke is, because I just feel like when we do get crosses in the box, there's always a chance Richarlison will get on the end of it. I feel like we're better going forward when Richarlison plays up front than maybe when Dom Solanke is. So, look, I think Richarlison, he's got a golden opportunity today. I think he hates Liverpool, always turns up in this fixture, for Tottenham Hotspur, score goals in the past against Liverpool for Tottenham Hotspur. And I just think if he starts again today, maybe he can help nick one and might put himself in the frame for Thursday night, because it's going to be an interesting one whether he does go with Dom or Richarlison, because at the end of the day, Thursday night, it's all about taking advantage of the home leg and scoring goals. So, I'd argue if he goes with Dom Solanke, he maybe caused himself a little bit of a problem. It's hard to know, but I think Richarlison will have to score today to maybe put himself in the frame for Thursday night.
On that, just quickly, I don't want to jump the gun too much, maybe because there is a question on this. I did speak to Drew on Friday night about this. Of any of the, I'm happy with a ton of changes, and we'll obviously talk about that. But the area where I would probably prefer there to be very few changes is really in the forward line, just because we have struggled to put away moves this season. We struggle to put away our chances. We struggle to be able to take our opportunities. And part of that is down to, I think, there's been so much rotation across the forward line that there's not really a lot of chemistry amongst the three players that are up front. There's not really that feeling of who is the main guy, who is the one that, you lean on, who are the guys that are used to playing with each other, playing off of each other. And, the importance on Thursday night is to score a lot of goals, hopefully, against this Bodo Glimt side. So I'd say he should go with the team that, at least the forward line, that he plans on starting Thursday night, just to give them that familiarity with each other, that confidence with each other. Even if we end up losing today, at least they got to play with each other, work off of each other, instead of just going into Thursday night cold.
No, do you know what? I was sort of thinking about that myself. I think that's the one area again. Do you know what? To be honest with you, I'd keep Ludeber and Richarlison up front again. I think it's the most. Look, how much of it is down to Forest's game plan? They went 2-0 up. They were going to sit back. The onus was on us then to break them down. How much did we look better because of the game plan Forest employed compared to us actually being good? But what I will say is it's the brightest we've looked in a long, long time going forward. And I would maybe stick with it today to see if it can yield any results heading into Thursday. It's just my thought on it. But Drew, you've been very silent. I know you're a guy who's probably been sitting there observing all your stats that you've got on your whiz computer there. How do you feel on the whole Dominic Solanke and Richarlison situation? And again, which one do you think fits the system best? And to the point that Jack made about the front line, would you go with the same today? The front line that maybe he's looking to play Thursday night?
I personally think that, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I do think Richarlison suits this system better, and I just think unfortunately, but for the injuries, I know there's suggestions that he's just kind of streaky, but if you look at the periods of time that he's had the injuries and the goals, if he hadn't had the injuries, potentially may have scored more goals. If buts and maybes. Obviously, he has been injured, and that's the fact. But I just think he's a little bit more potent. And I don't think that here's the negative. I don't think that when Solanke drops deep and brings others into play, I don't think he does that well enough to justify him being better in the system than Richarlison, because even though Richarlison might not do that, I think Richarlison's more effective in the penalty box. So I just think on those kind of stats alone, Solanke doesn't do enough of the other stuff to make him better than Richie going forward. That being said, the one thing I will say for Solanke, there's a lot to be said for being comfortable. Richarlison's been there a lot longer, so at the very least, he does have a bit more relationship with some of the players. Solanke is coming into a new squad with a right winger that doesn't know how to play right wing. Half the time, his left winger has been Timo Werner or an off-it Sonny. His midfield that are supposed to be creating the chances for him has been disjointed to absolute bollocks. So I kind of got to be, I got to give him that he's come into a team that he thought was going to be somewhat of a cohesive unit, and it's been a bit of a shower of shit. So the fact that he's been able to do what he has done, coming into the team with an injury, then picking up an injury, I don't want to be too unfair on him. The one thing I will say against that, though, is that when he's come back from injury, he's hardly hit the ground running. So
true.
I don't know. I think it's like Jack said, if you could combine the two, you'd have a hell of a player. I just don't think either of them are particularly what we need, or, what we'd choose if we had the choice of any strikers. But it kind of sadly is what it is at the moment, and you just got to go with what you've got, right? I hope they can kind of play themselves into a little bit of form, because when they do play well, I mean, they're very good football players. You don't get to have a career as long as they've had in the Premier League or even in the First Division without at least having some level of skill. Do you know what I mean? I'm not being completely, but yeah.
Do you know, I do take your point on Dominic Solanke, giving him a bit more time to maybe settle in. There's been, the wingers haven't really been settled this season, neither has the midfield to a large degree. And that all does affect your striker in terms of output and stuff. I fully take that on board. And also the fact that he's not used to being injured. What was it, 3 years, without an injury before coming to Tottenham, and then he suffered two this season. And maybe there is a part of him struggling and not really being knowing how to deal with it to a certain degree and stuff. I couldn't take all that on board. But one point you did mention was a bit, maybe Dom Solanke a bit deeper. I agree with you. I often find him underwhelming. So a lot of the times I actually think, even when he does hold up that ball, I often think he holds on to it too long.
Yeah.
There's times you're screaming at him, release the winger, put it in behind. He just holds on to it, and gets himself bundled down to the ground rather than playing it in line. And I think that's a huge problem in his game as well.
Yeah. The amount of times I've watched us play, I've watched him drop deep to try and pick up a ball, and I'm like, why are you doing that? Why aren't you further forward? And why isn't Maddison or somebody there doing that? Like, it almost feels like you're kind of all getting in each other's way at times. But then that's kind of been a little bit of my criticism. Again, I have to take that with, we've been so decimated this season. I guess it's been hard to work on patterns of play, and maybe that's why it looks kind of like the way it does at times. Maybe I'm giving them too much leeway and they should be able to just figure it out. But yeah, there's just times where I just wish he'd kind of float around a little bit more within the, just the width of the 18-yard box. Essentially take a leaf out of Ollie Watkins' book and do kind of what Unai Emery said to Ollie Watkins and say, look, stop running around trying to do all this, that. Stay with the 18-yard box, and then kind of, hopefully the wingers have the foresight to actually do winger things. And I mean, I mentioned it on a show the other day. the problem as well with Solanke and the service is that on the right-hand side, for the most part this season, you've had a winger that doesn't really want to take on his man. When he does take on his man, his crosses are weak. And on the other side, on the couple of occasions Timo Werner's put in an arguably a half decent ball. But for the most part, you've got Sonny, who doesn't really like going to the byline and putting in crosses. He wants to cut in and try and take it on his right foot. So, I feel for him in that regard, because it's very rare this season have I seen him run into a channel and have a ball put into a channel for him to really run onto. Yeah.
Is that not then on Postecoglou though to fit a system around it to make it work for him then?
I mean, this is why I understand why people get frustrated, because I don't consider myself to be any sort of tactician really, but if I can see that sort of thing, like why on the pitch don't we have? And this, I don't think it's just on Postecoglou really. It goes back to us not really having, I don't want to harp on about the same, but not having really like a general, not having somebody pointing saying, look, you go there, you go there. Even within the parameters of a 10, 15 minute kind of period, like you don't see, right, we're going to shut up shop for a minute. It always just seems to be, we're going to try exactly the same thing. It's almost like watching a kid try and do something, fall over and just get up and do it again, and fall over and get up. But there's no kind of, he doesn't seem to be learning that, hang on, maybe he needs to take a step backwards to go forwards. And maybe that's because he's trying to, I know he's said before that he doesn't want to, there's no point in him coming in, trying to change something. Then when the going gets tough or things get a bit hard, him saying, well, we'll stop doing that for a minute until we get all the pieces back, and then we'll start doing it again. My brain says, well, if you don't have the pieces to do it, you should adapt. But then I can understand the point of view of not wanting to change, because you sometimes maybe have to be stubborn. But then maybe that's where the Premier League's found him out. Maybe that only works up until a point, and now maybe he's gone, oh, actually, maybe I need to rethink some things. But I don't know. That's just me. Just to
quickly add on Richarlison Solanke. Biggest issue is that we have no sample size to work with of any kind, because Richarlison is always injured. So we've never really been able to see these two guys compete with each other. It'd be nice in an ideal world if this was the case, where we would be asking this question, oh, who's better in this system? Who's better for the scoring the goals? Who's better at creating the chances? We never can ask that, because Richarlison is always injured. And that was the same case when Harry Kane was around. Richarlison was there to compete with Harry Kane, to offer something different, to also give him rest when need be. And he's never been fit or available to do that. So we never get to have these conversations. It's always just one striker only for pretty much the entirety of the season, which then means, you just only have one guy to really think about instead of having two guys to think about for the system. And that's been also one of the major issues, I think.
And the thing is, go on.
We're saying this, 2 points on this. We're arguing about a player in Richarlison who a season ago most people said was less effective than a dustbin lid in the centre of the pitch anyway, and nobody wanted him in the club, and now we're saying he's probably better than Solanke. Solanke is probably better with the ball at his feet, but the problem is you've got two strikers there that probably do need some service, and we're putting jack shit service into them. We haven't got a decent winger that can constantly put a decent cross in, which is Rich's strongest point is his head, and yet we hardly ever put a ball into his head. Then the second strongest point with Richarlison is a ball where he doesn't have to think about it. He literally just kicks it towards the goal and hopefully scores, which is most of his goals. We're relying on
Richarlison's better when he doesn't think.
Exactly. Right. We're relying on Richarlison stopping the ball, turning and running, which he cannot do. And then we're relying on Solanke trying to run into a box, which is overcrowded. The problem isn't necessarily the two strikers that we've got. I mean, Jack hit it on the head. I think it was Jack, or unless it was my big bro here. That literally you need somebody who can stay fit. If Richarlison stayed fit, he'd be a half-decent striker. But if you don't give him the service, like you said, we've got Son and then we've got Kulu maybe on the other side, which always want to cut in and don't want to put a crossover. Odegaard and Tell have kind of started putting a few crosses in. Werner, when he did play, might put one decent cross per game. But the problem after that is once they start putting the crosses in, the strikers have given up running there because the ball never comes to them. So it's as much as we go round in circles with these arguments until the system is right, and then you've got the right players to suit the system. It doesn't matter whether we've got the world's best strikers up front. I mean, the only reason Harry Kane scored as many as he did, and I'm not saying he's rubbish before anybody, is because we had Kane and Son at the pinnacle of their careers. If it wasn't for Son, Kane wouldn't have scored half the goals he did. Them two had an absolutely magical link-up, and Kane didn't necessarily need a ball over the top or to his feet and hit it, because Kane was good at everything he did almost. But the problem is, until we get a decent winger who can actually run to the byline and put a cross in, then you ain't going to score any. They're not going to score the goal.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm sort of with you on that as well. To a large degree, that's been one of my biggest problems. Is that we haven't, put enough into the box. Asked enough questions of the opposition. At times, we're almost trying to play the perfect goal. And look, I maintain I just don't think the quality's there. I think it's a very hard forward line to a large degree to actually put the right components in place to actually make it work. I do think we're going to have to spend more investment on it over the summer. And I don't think Ange should have to change his system to a large degree, but I don't think he's used some of the personnel the best he could have. I think he could have easily said to Son, look, I need you to move over to the right wing, start crossing balls in. Kulu's left-footed. I need you to play left wing, put balls in. Mikey Moore is a player that has demonstrated when he plays, he will put balls in the box. Hasn't used them an awful lot, come out the back end. He's preferred to stick with the likes of Johnson on the right, Son off the left. And to a point, he sort of just got caught into a rat trap where our whole thing was just go down the left-hand side, put it across the box, and hopefully Brennan can get on the end of it. That's not sustainable or anywhere near sustainable going forward. If we want to be a good team going forward, we have to be able to attack through the middle. We have to be able to attack down the right-hand side plus the left-hand side. You have to have different avenues of attack. That's where my gripe comes in with Postecoglou. Has he used the personnel, to make the system work? I know people come back and argue Son's never played left wing and stuff like that, or never played right wing. I take it, but half of you guys wanted him to be our striker, so shut up and accept that, he can definitely move out onto the right-hand side. Same with Kulu. Kulu's been moved around since he's got here, but, if the problem is lack of service to the striker, put a left-footed side player on the left side, and just get him to cross the board. The reason why they're always cut in is because Son is right-footed playing on the left-hand side, and Kulu, when he's played out there, is left-footed cutting inside. And that also makes it hard for a striker then, in fairness to Solanke and players like that, to actually time your run correctly, because often you make one run thinking it's going to come in on the right foot. It doesn't. Then you have to double check. Then you have to make a different run towards the back post all the time because that cross is being floated in. And that's 9 times out of 10 where they go. It's very difficult for the strikers. But like I said, that's where I think Ange could have done better. He could have used the right personnel. It's clear to me this system needs a left footer on the left side and a right footer on the right side, or players that are two-footed. And that's to many people's point. We become far too predictable, and that's where I was getting bored. Cutting inside, passing it across all the time. It's what the opposition set up to do all week, and you're just allowing their game plan. That's where I think Postecoglou could have been smart and could have been braver to a degree. When you use some of them kids in Europa League, and I know they've come on and surprised us, and I get it's going to take them a while, but if you've got other players not performing, put them in there. You've got absolutely nothing to lose. To a degree, the reason why Postecoglou's under pressure is because he wasn't braver. He just wasn't braver, back at the time when he had all these decisions to make. And that's why he's under pressure today. So for me, I just don't think he's handled the people right across the forward line. I think, like the reason why we looked good the other night is you had Tell going down one side, putting in crosses, Udeberg on the other side, putting in crosses, and it wasn't pretty, but the amount of time the balls would bounce or fall back to us.
Couldn't complain about service.
Stuff. Exactly. You know, and that's where I think Postecoglou, has let himself down to a large degree. He's known as being an attacking manager, and it just feels like maybe he gave up when it was just, oh, fuck it, just get the ball down the left-hand side, and hopefully someone taps it in, rather than actually working on the training pitch to a degree and just, you know, trying little things. Left foot on the left side, right foot on the right side, you know, playing 2 pivots and playing 1 number 10 instead. Little things like that, you know, rather than sticking with the 3 all the time. I just think maybe he hasn't used his personnel to the best of his ability, I would argue.
Yeah.
I just said in their time. Oh, sorry, go on, Dad.
No, go on.
I just there are just times. There are times when I watch this team, and this is I'm not trying not to make this a dog on Ange thing, because it's as much the players as anything. But part of this system that baffles me is the inversion and the amount of inversion and the reluctance when we overlap to actually put in a cross, especially even on the left hand side. There are times when I've seen, and Udogie and Spence, there are times that I have seen them overlap Sonny. They're still a little bit reluctant to put in a ball. It still seems to then be cut back and then played back to Sonny and then goes back to the midfield. And you start getting like this horseshoe crap, like we said. Yeah. So I just wish they would kind of spread out a little bit and just, like you say, maybe have a left foot on the left, a right foot on the right, and actually put in some balls. But then, as Adrian on Spurs Diehard points out, 167, 170 games or something, and Solanke's got 6 headers. So, it's not exactly like he's an aerial king, and we haven't really had Richie. So in that regard, I can see it. But even on the deck, we're not very good at going to the byline and whipping him, putting in balls.
Yeah. And it's always the same thing. It's always a low cross pull back, and then half the time your midfielders ain't even running to get in the box. So, who you pulling it back to, it's absolutely madness. Big up there.
And then also as well, can you imagine if Postecoglou had, if he had Harry Kane and like the likes of a Perisic or something like that, like everything to be completely different. So in that regard, I got to feel sorry for the guy, because he was walking into one thing and then shit got pulled out from under him.
Do you not notice though, a lot of the passes that we do in the final third are probably 2 yards behind the player it's supposed to be going to?
Oh, stop!
You haven't got a lot of space in there, but when you're passing to a striker in the box, why the hell is it going a yard behind him all the time?
Do you know what? That's one thing that drives me mad, Soren. We done one ball the other day against Forest. Someone put it in behind for Tal. And I'm like, fuck me, that's the first time we've actually put the ball in behind for someone to run onto in I don't know how long.
I mean, the frustrating thing is, look, I mean, there's arguing against the players. I think, and so many people have said the exact same thing, it's not the problem with necessarily the front guys. To me, the one thing the whole system is lacking is either a monster number 6, somebody to help them 2 defenders out, or play 3 at the back, or play 5 at the back, 3 midfield, 3 defense, and let the 2 wingers, let the 2 full backs go forward. If you watch when on the games when we have looked incredible, and I know it's not many, and maybe the word incredible is the wrong word as well. I'm probably going to get some flack for that. But, when we have looked good and we've looked like we couldn't be beaten, we've played those inverted, full backs, and we've done this and we've done that. The problem is that it just isn't consistent enough. And then all of a sudden, I think this is where Drew and Jack and Demo and yourself have already said, it's almost like Ange has lost belief in his own system, because he's tweaked little things to change it and hasn't carried on playing it. And I get, we've been losing. You've got to keep changing things but if you honestly believe in your system, you don't change it. And that to me tells me that if he doesn't believe in his system and he knows that we're going to concede too many goals to win the match, then you all he's got to do is literally pull one player back and tell him to hold as a number 6. And then it allows all the full backs and everything to invert. I
think he's starting to try and do that with Bentancur. You don't see Bentancur venture as far forward as he as maybe we've seen that number 6. And I do think to a degree it's helping us look a little bit more solid, in terms of not being run through in the midfield. But then you've still got the problem at right fullback, Pedro Porro and stuff like that, which we're going to get onto. But I do agree with you on that one for sure. You look at Pochettino's system. He had the fullbacks high and wide. He had a lot of players pushed up, but you just had that core of Toby, Yan, and Wanyama back there to protect it, and it really worked. Whatever way he utilized it, it really worked, and I do think that's something that, when Postecoglou leaves Tottenham, I do think that's something, if he wants to come back at this level, that is something that he really needs to, think about moving forward. That's for sure.
Can I just add one thing to that, Dave? Sorry, I was just trying to get a point in quickly. Look, we can all talk about players and where they should and changing systems. It all boils down to the transfer window and not buying the right players to fit the Ange system and not buying players to fit his philosophy. We can all talk about fitting players here and not getting crosses in. This player's not good, that player good. It all boils down back to our recruitment at the start of the season in the summer, in the January window, where we didn't back Ange properly. And that's really coming back to bites on the arse, because we've bought some players that are mediocre, that are good on some days, but you want to buy. Well, this is when it comes to spending money. Spend money on decent players that you don't need to coach them. They can fit any system. They can fit any sort of gameplay you want to do, because you're buying for quality. We buy quantity, not quality, and I think this is where the problem is. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk anyone, but
I agree.
I that's my view in it.
No,
yeah,
look, go on.
I don't really. Here's the thing: I'm a bit naive when it comes to his previous squads, but I would hazard a guess that the squad that he had at Celtic was pretty decent for the level of the league. Like the players that he had were about as good as the league had to offer. I don't know if that's the same in Japan, but it feels to me, this isn't a slight on Ange. It feels to me like his system is predicated on having the players that the Dermo's just talked about, the players that you don't necessarily have to worry about. They've been there, done it. They know exactly what. I'm not going to say absolute peak, but to a certain extent, they've got to be top 1-2%. Do you know what I mean?
That's what
and I just think,
Tottenham, though. If we want to win trophies and that, that's what you need. Especially if you want to do it consistently. We might pick up the odd trophy here and there, but if we want to compete consistently, that's what you need. Same when Jose and Conte were here. Everyone goes, "Oh well, they needed good defenders." Like, yeah, but Tottenham need good defenders. It's what we argue in here. It's like at the end of the day, if we want the manager to work out whatever their system is, whether it's defensive or attacking, you've got to supply them the right players to make it work, and that's the problem at Tottenham. And that's where I was really disgruntled in the summer transfer window. I was just like, we haven't really done enough to really kick this team on, especially going forward and stuff like that. And look, we paid the price for it this season. And that's where Ange, I've always argued, has been let down, was this summer. I think last season he finished fifth. He said, right, I've got everyone talking about trophies, journalists and everybody. Now what we're going to deliver this summer, and then we deliver we delivered, and then in January again when we needed help. Okay, we need help. We need to somehow, we're still in the semi-finals of the League Cup and stuff like that. What you bringing in? More kids, more inexperienced players, and it's just like, fucking hell. When are we going to realize that this football club, quality bloody matters? I'm not being funny, but every fan gets frustrated by the footballs because some of them can't even execute the basics on a consistent basis. A good team can just make them 5-10 yard pass, make it look easy, not putting them behind them out for throw-ins and stuff like that, and that's a huge problem. And this is what I keep saying. Quality absolutely matters at Tottenham. It really does. It doesn't matter what manager you bring in. Quality matters. There's very few managers that are going to come into and you've got to remember, the Premier League is at an all-time level in terms of quality. You look at a lot of the smaller teams in the Premier League, they've got some unbelievable quality players there. Now more than ever before, quality matters on the football pitch. Going down this route where we're looking to develop players, that's why we lose a lot of games, because you're developing them on the job. It's not ideal. But big up Dermotron. Really appreciate the Irish Hotspur membership. He's gifted that out.
To International Observer. Come on and have your say.
Yeah, come on and have your say on Monday, International Observer. Come and have a speak with me, my man. And then we also got Faz Radfar 4-1 Spurs. Positive performance matters today, not the result. Look, if we lose today, we have equal, I think it's Ozzy Ardiles' record of the most losses in a league season. And you would argue there's probably at least another couple on the way, which means officially we've lost more games in the league than we have ever experienced before, which I'm sorry, it's not a good omen for Ange Postecoglou, even if he wins the Europa League to a certain degree. So I would argue where Postecoglou is at in his performance and in his results to a certain degree. Faz Radfar. Look, I'm one of them. I'm not really expecting anything today. I understand it's men against boys out there today. I understand all of our focus is on the Europa League. Even if Andrew's sitting in there telling them, which he's not, go out there and make sure you put in your best performance today. Players are going to take their foot off the gas and stuff like that and, look towards Thursday. So I'm not really expecting much today, but I would argue results need to start coming in quick and fast. I'm not one of these. I haven't given up yet. I still want to win and save as much face as I can in the Premier League. Faz Radfar, although I do understand how much of a daunting task it is going to be, my man. Big yourself up. Really appreciate the support. But I am going to take a minute, guys, to plug the best NordVPN in the world. Shame we don't have the best striker anymore, but what we do have is the best NordVPN, is the best VPN, and that is true. NordVPN. Guys, you're here every week with us. I'm surprised if you haven't already got it because it's such a help if you're a sports fanatic like me, to be able to just jot yourself around the world and watch all these sporting events. If you're a connoisseur of many different sports, again, VPN is great for that. You can go and watch polo and all them sort of games. It's absolutely brilliant. So, guys, make sure you get on it. For those who don't know what a VPN does, basically it allows you to bounce your location around. You can tune into live sporting events that maybe not be accessible in your country or your area. But not only that, you can also use it to try and get the best price on flights, hotels, and shopping and stuff like that online as well, all while being protected, which I think is absolutely key. They've got loads of great security features within there. They protect your bank details and all that good stuff when you are shopping online or purchasing online. And not only that, they protect you on public Wi-Fi, which I think in the modern day with the way technology is going, I think protection online is so important because we are going down this world of technology. So I think everyone should always have a VPN in their back pocket. It's also great for traveling, for you and the family. You can have it on up to 10 devices as well. And so if that's your jazz, make sure you get over to nordvpn.com, try out the 2-year plan, 30-day back or 30-day money back guarantee. If you do not like it, just type in the code FLATCAP and get your discount. 2-year ain't for you. Check out the other plans available. Make sure you get on one of them. But I do think the VPN is crucial. Me and Jack will both be using ours when we go to London. Prime example, it's absolutely great when you're traveling. Jack can tune in and watch his NFL or his MLS or whatever he wants on his NordVPN, and I can tune back here and watch the Gaelic football. So absolutely brilliant. So make sure you get on that. The link is pinned to the chat or in the description below this podcast. Get over there and get what's best for you. Have I left anything out, Jack?
No, covered it all. I'll be using it to watch my Mariners when I'm in the UK, and I'll also be able to use it for various other things when I'm over in the UK to catch up on any streaming, that I might be doing. I'm watching Temptation Island at this moment in time, so I'll be able to watch that with no worries at all.
I will have to have a conversation about that after. I need to know if it's any good.
Shocking.
Guys, I do want to
Absolute
have a
brain
chat
rot.
about Wilson Odegaard, though, and then potentially, if we have time, a little bit on Kevin Danso as well. But with Odegaard, look, I think the Forest game was only 6th start of the season due to injury and stuff like that. But he has shown glimpses of his potential, later on this season. What do we think Odegaard needs to show between now and the end of the season to strengthen his case for a more, what would you say, put himself more forward as a starter heading into next season? And which area of his games does he need to improve to show that he has what it takes to be the first choice winger at Tottenham Hotspur?
Look, for me, I think Odegaard or Odegaard.
Whatever you want to call him.
I never get it right. Is it
Odegaard
or Odegaard? I don't know why I call him Odegaard, but okay, Odegaard. I love him. I love the way he attacks the fullback. I love the way he takes his man on. Bit like Annan Lennon back in the day. Took his man on and sort of really attacked him. I think if he improved his crossing a little bit, I think that would make him a really good winger. But he is young. He's got a lot of talent, and I think under the right manager, I do feel that he will become a great winger at Tottenham. I really do. I see a lot of potential in him. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have seen some great wingers in my day, back to Tony Galvin, to Chris Waddle, and players like that would run down that wing and cross the ball or cut in and put a good curling shot. And I suppose for the younger fans, probably Ginola, probably you'd be your first sort of proper winger like that, and that's what we're missing. As much as I love Brennan Johnson for me, I think he isn't cut his winger. I said it before and I got slack for it. I'm going to say it again. I think he'd be better as a number 10 or playing that sort of attacking midfield role than a winger. I know Jack's putting his hand over his face thinking, oh my God, he said it again.
I need to hide my emotions.
Yeah. But look, I just feel Odebear, sorry. I just think he's got the potential to become a really good winger. I really do. And I love him. He gets me off my seat when he's on the wing. He really does. And he's done that since he started. I think in the summer just concentrates on his crossing. I think if he just controls his enthusiasm and learns to control it and learns to put it in the right way, I think we've got one hell of a winger on our hands. And maybe Johnson can learn a lot from him. Maybe he can push Johnson into saying, well, hang on, if he's doing that and he's getting picked over me, maybe I need to improve. And where do I need to improve? And I think he could learn an awful lot. But that's just my view in it. I love him. I absolutely love him. I really do. I think he's a great talent. I don't know what Drew Soren thinks, but I see a little bit of Galvin and Waddle in him, a little bit. I really do.
Are you his number one fan now? Because I know you were Brennan Johnson's earlier on.
No, I know Johnson. I'm always Johnson's number one fan. He's my number 2 fan now. I'm number 2. He's in number 2. I'm still Johnson's number 1 fan. I would die in that hill. I probably have died on that hill more than once.
When it comes to Brennan Johnson, what I will say is I completely disagree the notion of him being a number 10.
I know
he hasn't got the strength,
doesn't
have the passing ability, anything like that. Completely disagree with that notion, but you know that's not new. What I will say is, though, I do think that Brennan Johnson is slightly responding to having Odegaard ahead of him, because you are seeing Johnson actually now in recent games starting to pick up that ball and put crosses in the box. So I think that maybe Odegaard coming in ahead of him is maybe making Johnson realize that he does have to offer a bit more. And I am seeing him try a bit harder, even though I'm not Johnson's biggest fan. And him smiling on the sideline the other day did not help his cause in my books whatsoever when we're 2-0 down. When it comes to Wilson Odegaard, look, there's no doubt about it. He excites me a lot more. He's what we're used to seeing at Tottenham with our wingers, the likes of your Bales, your Ginolas, your Lennons, people like that. Get on the ball, brave, take players on. But that end product is still in question with Wilson Odegaard. As much as he tries and as much as he puts in the box, that end product is not consistent enough yet to be first choice winger at Tottenham. And I do think, that's something that he needs to demonstrate between now and the end of the season if he wants to lay his hat down. But if not, I still think we still need to go out and invest money on right wing, bring in an experienced, proper right winger, and, someone that maybe Wilson Odegaard can learn off. Because right now, in that position, there's no one that Wilson Odegaard can learn off. And I think he could get caught in the same trap as Johnson, where it feels like, there's no one else here. Put me under pressure. I can just get away with what I'm doing. You do need competition. You do need people to learn off. I was listening to Ryan Giggs on Rio Ferdinand's podcast the other day, and he was saying, how much he taught Nani and players like that, Ronaldo and stuff like that. And that, I think that's someone that likes Odegaard needs, someone like Gray, Bergvall, a lot of players in these teams more. Someone like that they can learn off. And Son ain't getting any younger, and I think they've learned as much as they can off him. But I think there's time to invest on the right wing, and then keep Odegaard around and get him to learn off him. And then I think it's just up to Johnson to prove that he can start doing more if you really want. If not, he's going to have to maybe rediscover himself in another position, maybe that number 10 that Darmo's talking about. But anyone else want to come in on Wilson Odegaard?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say I think he's a good little player. I think it's the same thing with one or two of our players, and I know there's a bit of conversation going on in the chat about it. The potential is there with these kids, and
yeah,
I just wonder, you know, a few people have said it. I think I've heard Sean say it, and a couple of others. It's not this manager that's going to benefit from these players. It's the next manager, if assuming Postecoglou maybe goes in the summer. But
what if he doesn't?
well, if it doesn't, I think you'll start to see the benefits next season of these young players. It's they've had this experience in the Premiership this season, and I think players like Odebear, like probably Tell, Bergval's only going to get better. I mean, look at the player he's going to be. Look at the player hopefully Archie Gray's going to be.
Are they though? The reason why I question that, Soren, is because I use Papa Matasar as my example. He was a player on the rise. He hasn't really kicked on. You know, he's lost out to someone like Bergval.
Yeah, but do you not think that's probably because of how the team's playing? You've got these young players who probably do need that, that experience around them, but not necessarily experience of older players. But if you're on a team that's constantly losing, you're not going to play to your best all the time. And you see, Papsar, there's still glimpses of brilliance in that kid, but. It just needs either the right system or the right manager. Now, I'm not going to turn on Ange Postecoglou and say he's not the right manager. I don't think he is, but I think next season we're going to see a whole different team. And it doesn't really matter who's in charge. These kids will be better. And Odebear, the only thing he needs to do is probably same as most of our wingers at the moment is look up and just see when the right, learn when that right time is to put that cross in. Either go past one more player or put the early cross in. There's not enough consistency with our wingers, but I think Odebear, Tell if we keep him.
How do people feel on Tell as well? Because we are approaching a time where we have to weigh it up and make that decision. Now, look, I must put it out there. Don't base it on the 65 million. We will not pay that when it comes to Matisse Tell. They owe us money for Harry Kane. We will get that down. Mark my words. So just take it on basically what we've seen. Take the price tag out of it. Is he good enough going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people in Germany. I know a few people over there, and I don't know whether he's as good as some of the hype has been about him. But he's certainly a damn good young player. And once he fits into the system and gets his feet on the ground, I mean, don't forget, we talk about these players, and especially Europeans or coming from another country, coming into our country, learning our language, learning our system. It's not easy for 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. I can only imagine going to another country and having to fit into that country when you don't maybe speak the language or you don't necessarily know the customs and things like that. This lad has got potential, same as Odebear. They are. I'm not going to say sleeping giants because I think that's probably the wrong word. But another year or two under their belts, if they're still playing for Tottenham, these youngsters that we've got. And we're talking Mikey Moore and all these lot, they're going to be phenomenal players if we get the right system and the right manager in place, because they are good players.
Do you know what? Don't get me wrong. I think it's been a bit of a double-edged sword with some of the youngsters. As good as Bergval's been, he's cost us goals. As good as Kinski's been, he's also cost us some goals in games and stuff like that. It's been a bit of a double-edged sword. But look, the younger players haven't really been the problem at Tottenham this season. It's actually been more the experienced players that we've all really been let down by, the likes of Sons, Maddison, Solankis, Romero's to a large degree. Players like that, Porro, players, it's more our senior players that have let us down. And I think that's the big problem. That's what we need to sign. We need to sign leaders, real men, that are willing to come in here, to replace the senior guard we've got, because I honestly don't see these players kicking on if we don't bring in them right sort of leaders to help it.
But you talk about Odebear and you talk about Tell. The one thing they've got is, they're playing for the same national team. They can talk to each other. They can communicate to each other perfectly well. And I mean, somebody said, how do we know these youngsters are going to stay? Well, they're staying for at least 5 years, aren't they? Or 4 years, because they're contracted. So that's why they're going to stay. I mean, unless big offers come in, then that's different. But, you know, this group of young players are all pretty much tied down for a while. I mean, you know, nothing is ever written in stone. You know, if somebody comes in for them or a bigger team or whatever, yeah, they'll move. I get that. But, you know, at the moment, we know players like Kulu, I think Kulu's got a few more years, but Odebear, probably Tell, hopefully, Van der Ven, you know, all these, they've got at least 3 more seasons with us if we hold them to the contract. So, you know, why would we not be expecting them to start to gel?
No. Look, I fully take that point. But like I said, I do think, you know, we do need some leaders to really kick them on, some people that they can learn off. I do think, you know, when I listen to the class of 92 or whatever you want to call it, the, you know, United era, you know, a lot of them youngsters, you know, the likes of your Nevilles, your Scholes and all that, they all speak about having the likes of your Brian Robsons, people like that in the dressing room that they could go to, get advice off, get experience, little golden nuggets to help improve their game. It's absolutely invaluable. And I do think we need them sort of players. Like, I don't want to go on Maddison, but how can he be giving people advice and nuggets when he's not even playing well himself? You know, same with Son to a large degree. And I do think, you know, that is an area we really need to look at in the summer if we want to kick on. I'd argue that's half the reason why we're in the mess we are now, because we didn't sign the players of your 25, 26, 27 years of age to really come in and help kick us on. But look, then the starting lineup is out, so we'll get on to that. And then I do want to come back to Drew and we'll get his opinion on the wingers, and then we'll also get his opinion on the starting lineup. But just before that, we'll also let Dermo go as well. I know Dermo has his own show to go and get set up and get ready and running. So Dermo, really appreciate your time this afternoon, my man. Thank you very much. What's your score prediction?
Look, you know me, I'm delusional as ever. I'll go for a 2-0 win. I know I said the draw in my predicted lineup. I know, Jack, I didn't watch it, and I know you're probably thinking
you must have had a pack of Skittles today, did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I've just drank a load of them. Can I just say the lineup? That is the lineup I expected today. But that's the lineup that's going to get us a win. On you Spurs, we can do it with the mighty Tottenham Hotspur. And I'm going to go for a lie down now because I'm too hyper.
Big up, Tron. Well, the guys, we got Dermot's link here in the chat, so make sure you please get on that, get over there, and smash that subscribe button. Dermot, you're going to have a good afternoon, sir, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah, you too, and I can't wait for 2 weeks when I get to see you in person. And Jack, you and me are going to have a whiskey, man. Or vodka, one or the other.
You can discuss Brendan Johnson in number 10 role at great detail.
Oh, that's going to be a great conversation.
That'd be a real short conversation, man.
Give me the bottle.
Real short.
Give me the bottle already. Speak to you later, lads.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. So the lineup is as Vicario is in goal, Spence at right back, Danzo and Davies at centre back, Destiny Adogi at left back, Bergvall, Gray, and James Maddison in the midfield. Many people should get their wish. It looks like they're going to get their wish today. Seeing Archie Gray in the midfield. And do you know what? I think it's the right decision. I think we have to put him in there in a big game environment like today. Test them to see if we can save money on that area and prioritize it in other areas, you know, come next season. So I think today's a good test of the kid. Maddison then makes up the midfield. Johnson off the right, Solanke through the middle, and Matisse Tal off the left-hand side. And I just wonder, the Maddison, Johnson, Solanke Tell, is that what we're going to see Thursday night along with Bergvall in there? Be very, very interesting. Maybe Jack's getting his wish that the team he's going to play Thursday, the front line, maybe starts here today. But Drew, down to you. Let's get your thoughts on the winger situation that we were talking about when it comes to the likes of Wilson, Odebear, Matisse Tell. Let's get your thoughts and then your thoughts on the lineup.
I mean, I don't want to put too much pressure on, you know, teenage kids. I mean, or, you know, especially even Johnson, like, you know, people give him a hard time. I think I've been pretty balanced on him throughout the season. Like I've always said that he's always needed to progress, but I mean, it's a progression from last year. And if he can start adding, you know, some assists and a better final ball and maybe, you know, a couple more goals year on year, then that's all you can really ask. But as far as Odebear and Tell, I just wish, from a club point of view, we'd have done a better job of giving them players to look up to and, you know, and then take over from. You know what I mean? I think we've sort of harped on about it a couple of times or a few times this year about the squad, not, the management of it. And it's frustrating that we're having to put all of our eggs, or we're having to put the weight of a club this size on the shoulders of guys this young.
That's the problem.
Like it's just not. Yeah, it's just not fair. I'm absolutely sure that we went into this season 2, if not 3 players light of very, very good quality that could have spread out the load and meant that. And I do take on board the whole Bergvall Gray. They'll learn from this and they'll be better players because of it. And that, that's fair enough. But there is also a universe where they came into games for 15, 20 minutes, showing supreme confidence with a team that were winning, had their foot on the ball, were popping it around. And instead, they've had baptism by fire, multiple weekend after weekend after weekend. So, I mean, it's one of those things we'll never know. I just wish as a club we were better prepared and we weren't having to have this conversation and say, should we spend money on Tell? Is he the answer? Because it shouldn't come down to that in the first place.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely spot on when you say the weight of the club is on, the young guns' shoulders. They are the ones carrying it this season to a large degree. And, I think it's a damning indictment of where we're at, really. I think you're absolutely spot on there. But look, what's your thoughts in terms of the lineup? I mean, a lot of people are saying, yes, finally Archie Gray in midfield, but I think Nick Carey threw in a bit of a speed wobble there. He sort of suggested, could we see it be a 5 at the back today with Archie Gray dropping in a bit like what we did at Everton? I mean, it's not beyond the realms of impossibility.
Not again.
We've seen it before against Everton, and we were 3-0 down by half time. I mean, so Simon, let's get your thoughts on the lineup here. Is it good enough to go and compete today? It's clear that we've rested Romero, Van de Ven, Bentancur, and that for midweek. But, I mean, do you fear with this lineup, and do you think it is a 5 at the back, or is Archie Gray finally going to be in midfield?
Well, my thought when I saw it was finally Archie Gray's getting a chance in midfield, and then my second thought was, what a frigging game to have your first proper game is a number 6 sort of thing against bloody Liverpool. And all I can see now is if we lose and he has an average or poor game against Liverpool, who are the best team in the league and are about to win the league, everyone's going to slaughter him. So the kid's got no chance today. I don't see a back 5. I'll be surprised. But then, who knows? I think if we're looking at Bergvall and Maddison in midfield, we're going to get absolutely slaughtered. We've got to have 3 in midfield.
Liverpool gone really strong as well. Sorry to cut over you. I'll just read this now quickly for you.
Yeah.
Alisson, Becker in goal, and then Robertson, Konate, Van Dijk, Arnold, Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai, Salah, Gakpo, and Diaz. So that's about as strong as you could have gotten.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with Gray in midfield today is it's because he hasn't trusted him really there yet. And it's almost like you put him in against the best team in the league. And if he fails, then he can turn around and say, well, I told you he wasn't good enough for that position. And there isn't many number 6s that are going to hold that position today against Liverpool. I hope he has an absolutely stellar game because I think he's a fantastic player. I what he's done since he's come to us, the amount of people at the beginning of the season saying he'd never get a game this season, he wasn't good enough. People saying he's just a mere player and below average, and he's come from Championship. He's not Premiership level, and he should. He's had some good games this season. I hope he has a brilliant game today. And look, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. They want to go out in style today. They want to win the league. They don't want it going on any longer. Look, it's not very often I expect a loss, and it's not very often I admit that we might lose. I think this could be a first for the channel for me. It's going to be tough for us today, and if we lose, the only thing I want, if we do lose, is at least put in some sort of performance. At least, stand there and be counted. I don't care if we do lose, we lose. If we win, fantastic. If it's a draw, it's a draw. Just don't get absolutely slaughtered.
I just don't want to be embarrassed today. Honestly, I just look. I think every rational Spurs fan going in knows the task we're up against. We got popped off the park in the Carabao Cup quarter-final or semi-finals down there. Men against boys, could barely get on the ball. Davies crossed the back line. I mean, he's defending the other day when he couldn't even compete with Morgan Gibbs-White in the air and then gets caught ball watching. Doesn't give me much hope today at all. Danzo, be interested to see what he can do. I thought he was bright on the ball. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do. I think fullback-wise, I think he's gone with the right fullbacks today, actually. I think playing Pedro Porro, we would have been embarrassed today. He's a target for every team. But Gray's an interesting one, I don't subscribe to this narrative that Postecoglou doesn't trust Archie Gray. I'd argue he trusts him more than any of the youngsters. The fact that he says to him, do you know what? I think you can play in centre-back, and I think you can do a job for me where it's not going to be too costly. I think you can do a job for me at fullback. I actually think it speaks to the testament and the trust that he actually has in Gray. The fact that he's looked at Basuma, Bentancur, Bergval, all the other all the other midfield options he's had, and he goes, you know what, Gray? You're the guy I trust to fill in at centre-back, which is no easy feat, by the way. You don't put a guy in there if you don't think he can do the job, and I actually think it speaks volumes of how much he actually trusts Archie Gray. Due to the injuries we had across that back line, someone was going to have to fill in. And the fact that he picked Archie Gray, I think speaks testament to how much he actually trusts him. But also, I think, if he does start into midfield today, I think what a wonderful opportunity to show that he can be that guy to build that midfield around heading into next season. I think it's a great opportunity for the kid today.
I agree with you with that. I mean, when I say he doesn't trust him, I don't mean he doesn't trust him necessarily as a player or in the squad. I just, he hasn't given him that opportunity to play what most consider to be his strongest position. It's one of those that we've seen it, and we've shouted for it a few times, saying that he's maybe played Papsar or Bissouma even in front of him when he could have given that chance. I mean, today is a fantastic opportunity for him. I hope it goes really well because, the amount of people that have, told me at the beginning of the season that he would never get in the team, he would never be ready, he would never, he wasn't good enough, he was a championship player at best. This is just, I think he's had a great first season for his age, and he'll only get stronger. But yeah, I hope today he comes out and shows us how good a player he can be. And look, I'm not expecting him to be a world beater in there today. I just hope, he does a good job.
Fair. Look, I would hope even if Gray doesn't have the best of games, I would hope as well, there's calmness around the fan base towards him. At the end of the day, it's a tough ask going to Liverpool away. They're going to be on it today. The emotion's going to be there. They're going to look to get out nice and fast. They're going to look to do it in style today. It's been a tough game for the likes of Basuma and Bentancur going there, let alone someone like Archie Gray in that midfield. And I would just hope common sense sort of prevails, that no one really goes after him if he has a bad game. At the end of the day, it's his first start in there this season in that midfield. And then, sometimes it can take you, a game or even 30 minutes, but sometimes that 30 minutes can be costly. But I just hope common sense prevails around him today. And, because the reality is you go to the Forest game, you go to the Wolves game, when we've had Europe, the Man City game as well, when we've had Asia out there, reality is they take the foot off the gas. You know what I mean? And it's very hard to judge a player like Gray in a midfield when you've got other players, maybe the likes of Madison and people like that, maybe protecting themselves a little bit for Thursday night. So, I just hope common sense does prevail around Archie Gray. But we will read out the bench. Some people are saying it's too small to see. So we've got Kinski on the bench, Pedro Porro. We have Romero. We also have Mickey van der Ven, Basuma, Sarr, Kulusevski, Udebur, and Richarlison. So that's the bench. So, you'd argue there's players we can, dip in and dip out there.
No Mikey Moore, though.
No, Mikey Moore. Yeah, disappointed again on that one. But there's been rumors circulating that he's had a bit of a, I don't know how true they are. There has been rumors circulating that he has been carrying a bit of a knot recently. Like I said, I don't know how true they are, but
he hasn't been in the under-21s or the under-18 squad for a minute. He's played one game.
If he didn't have a knot, you would think he
would be right? In there. Yeah, and I'm sure Lily White Rose had a picture of him, and he said to him that he was struggling a little bit with a knock. Plus, you add to the fact that he still had that virus thing, and the fact that he's 17. I mean, you got to wrap him in cotton wool at times, don't you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, it just hops back onto we shouldn't be putting the weight of this club on a 17-year-old's shoulders. So there's plenty of time for that kid. If he's as good as people think he is, there'll be plenty of time.
Look, I think eventually he'll find his way to the top, whether it's under this manager or a new manager. I think, like you said, cream usually rises to the crop. And I think all he's got to keep doing is just showing what he's shown so far with these minutes. Keep taking them, keep setting up goals, keep causing problems. If you do that, eventually you'll land where you're supposed to be. Well, that's the hope anyway. But look, I'm not even going to go and ask people for score predictions today. I know I asked them. I'll probably throw them under the bus. I'm not even going to ask you guys for score predictions today. To be honest with you, I don't think anyone has a good feeling going into today's game. No one wants to sit here and say, Tottenham are going to lose. And, the reality is, as much as tough today is going to be, I'm going to believe until, we can get a result today. As stupid as I am, I'm going to believe until, 3 minutes in and we're 2-0 down. But look, that's it. But guys, that's it for the pre-match build-up. I want to say a massive thank you to Drew, to Soren, to Dermo, to Jack as well. Getting out of bed at 5:30 this morning. I think Drew was in around the same time as well. Really appreciate your guys' effort all season long. They haven't been easy to do with the amount of games we've lost, but you've still come here and provided great conversations around it. So I really appreciate it, guys. I want to say a massive thank you to all you guys at home tuning in there as well this afternoon. Again, it's a bit of a nothing burger today. We're just hoping to sort of not be embarrassed and save face. So thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate the support today. And then thank you to the people who've gone the extra mile as well. Wembley 1, appreciate it. Dermatron, Kill Switch, Ryan Trestane and Faz Radfar. I really appreciate it, guys. But look, that's it from us. We'll be back here in half an hour's time for the watch along. Hopefully, we don't get too embarrassed today. Hopefully, look, even I'll take a draw. We don't lose. And Liverpool the title. Ideally, I'd like to delay it a little bit just to sort of rub it in with my friends. But look, it's a big game. Just get today over and done with when we'll roll into Thursday. As always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. Spoil the party.